Hello viewers, let us study today the nature of Indian federalism. Indian federalism has evoked a lot of interest by both Western and Indian scholars, primarily because of the peculiarities of the functioning of Indian federal system. In fact, Indian federalism is often termed as quasi-federal, competitive federalism, or collaborative or cooperative federal system. Now, after 1990s, when many communist federations has collapsed, like the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, scholars are interested to note how did the Indian multinational federal system survive. In fact, in 1960s, Selig Harrison, a scholar working on Indian federalism, had noted and had forecasted that Indian federalism was going to disintegrate in the near future. However, Indian federal system has survived amidst all odds. Let us try to find out the answers as to why Indian federal system is so peculiar and why does it evoke so much of interest among the scholars. Now students, federalism is a form of government where power is shared between the national government and the regional governments. K.C. Ware, one of the leading exponents of federalism, defines federal government as a method of dividing power so that the general and regional governments are each within a sphere, coordinate and independent. There are two models of federations in the world. One is holding together and the second one is coming together federations. Holding together federations are one where the large country chooses to divide its authority between the member states and the central government, and the central government is exclusively powerful. Coming together federations are one where the regional units come together and share their sovereign powers with the central government in exchange of security. America is a classic example of coming together federation. In the case of coming together federations, the units enjoy more autonomy than holding together federation. India is an example of a holding together federation. Now, what are the distinguishing features of a federal state? First, dual government, one central government and many provincial or regional governments. Second, clear-cut demarcation and distribution of powers between the central and the provincial governments. Third, establishment of a written constitution and the supremacy of the constitution. In federations, the constitution is supposed to be written, rigid, and the supremacy is accepted by all institutions. The fourth feature of a federation is the existence of an independent court system wherein these courts exercise and resolve disputes between the central and the regional governments. The authority of the courts in a federation is considered to be absolute. Let us try to see whether these features of federation are available in India or not. Dual system of government, yes. Indian federation exhibits two sets of government, the central government or the union government and state governments. Besides the union and the state governments, we also have a third tier, we call it the local governments, where we have the panchayats and the municipalities. So far as distribution of powers are concerned, yes, the 7th schedule of the Constitution provides for three kinds of lists, the union list, the state list and the concurrent list. Originally, the union list consisted of 97 subjects on which the union government would have exclusive jurisdiction to make laws. However, after a number of amendments, the 97 subjects have been increased to 100 subjects. So today, the central government can make laws on 100 subjects. So far as the state governments are concerned, the state list provides for 66 subjects on which the state governments can make laws. However, after successive amendments, the number of subjects in the state list has been reduced to 61. Finally, we have the concurrent list where the states and the union exercise concurrent or equal jurisdiction. There were originally 47 subjects in the concurrent list and that has increased to 52 subjects in the concurrent list. So we find that so far as distribution of powers between the central and the state governments are concerned, in view of these three lists, India is a federation. Thirdly, so far as constitution is concerned, yes, we have a written constitution. The constitution clearly explicates the powers and functions of the central, regional, and well as the local governments, besides speaking about the rights and duties of the citizens. The Constitution also clearly provides for the method of amending the Constitution, and where the central government has power and the states have some powers in the form of amending the Constitution. Finally, we can see that the courts, the Supreme Court is the final authority to interpret the Constitution as well as to resolve disputes between the central and the regional governments. Apparently, it might appear that yes, India is also a federal country like any other federation, and that all the features of federations are available in India, even though the Constitution never uses the term federal or federation in the constitutional provisions, but rather we have just learned that India is a union of states. However, what makes the study of Indian federalism so interesting is the peculiarities of Indian federalism. India is a federation and not a federation because there are some centralizing or unitary features in Indian federation. Let us try to study the peculiarities of Indian federalism. Number one, strong center. The central government is excessively strong not only in its executive power but also legislative powers. First, the union government has more powers mentioned in the union list than the state list. Secondly, the most important subjects are mentioned in the union list. Thirdly, the center has overriding powers on the concurrent list. If there is a conflict between a subject in the concurrent list between the union and the state, the laws made by the union government reigns supreme. Residuary powers are vested in the union government. This is very different from USA, where residuary powers are vested in the state governments. Thus, we can clearly see that the union government has an edge over the state governments. States are not indestructible. What does it mean? The US Federation is considered to be a federal system which is an indestructible union of indestructible states, which means the 50 states of the American Union are indestructible. You cannot change the borders of the American states. India, on the other hand, is an indestructible union of destructible states. By virtue of Article 3 of the Constitution of India, Parliament has the power to unilaterally change the borders of any state, amalgamate two or more states, increase or decrease the boundaries of the state. Herein, what is only available to the states is mere consultative power. That means the center is not dependent on the consent of the affected state to change its boundaries to its inconvenience. Therefore, we can see that the central government has considerable powers when it comes to changing state boundaries. Another important peculiar feature of the Indian Federation is the existence of a single constitution. There is one constitution which provides for the powers of the union government as well as the powers of the state governments. However, if you look into the American Federation, you will find that there are two constitutions. The states also have their constitution which provides for exclusive powers of the states mentioned in the state constitution. India, on the contrary, operates within a single framework of constitutional rule. Another important peculiarity of Indian federalism is the flexibility of the constitution. Generally, federations have rigid constitutions which are very difficult to change. The fact that we have had more than 100 amendments to the constitution since 1950 speaks about the flexibility of the Indian constitution, and this is one of the major reasons why we say that the Indian constitution is a quasi-federal, because most of the provisions of the constitution can be amended by a simple majority of the union parliament. In America, on the other hand, the states can also propose an amendment to the union constitution. Another very important peculiarity of Indian federalism is that there is no equality of state representation in the upper house, that is the Rajya Sabha. Generally, in all federations, the upper house consists of equal representations. Say the American Senate, which is the upper house in the American Congress, consists of 100 senators. Each state, that is 50 states, send 2 senators to the Congress irrespective of whether the states are large or small. The Senate, as the representative of the American states, consists of equal representation from all the 50 states. India, on the other hand, does not speak about equal representation of states. The number of representatives of the states in the Rajya Sabha varies between 1 and 31. Thus, we can see that the Indian states do not have equal representation in the upper house of the Indian Parliament, that's the Rajya Sabha. Another very important peculiar feature is the emergency provisions under Article 352, 356 and 360 of the Constitution. The Constitution stipulates three kinds of emergencies: national, state and financial emergencies. In all these three kinds of emergencies, powers are transferred from the state and the state ceases to exercise its normal executive or legislative powers. During an emergency, the center becomes all-powerful and the states go under total control of the center. It converts the federal structure into a unitary one, and we find that the states have been subjected to multiple times of state emergencies since inception. Another important peculiarity of the Indian federal system is existence of single citizenship. Irrespective of the states in which we live, we are all Indian citizens. This is something very different from other federations. For example, in America, you have the system of dual citizenship, where individuals are citizens of the American federal system as well as the respective states where they work and live. All citizens in India, irrespective of the state in which they are born or reside, enjoy the same rights, because we do not have any concept of state giving rights to the citizens residing therein. Thus, we do not have the concept of state citizenship in India, we just have national citizenship. Another important peculiarity of the concept of integrated judiciary. The Indian Constitution has established the Supreme Court at the top and the High Courts at the next tier of the judicial system, and the Indian Supreme Court is said to be the custodian of rights as well as the custodian of the Constitution. In US, on the other hand, you have a double system of court where you have the American Supreme Court where the federal laws are enforced and the state high courts have their respective jurisdiction. All India services. In USA, you have the system of separate federal services and state services with respective area of jurisdiction. In India, we have central services as well as state services. In addition to that, we also have all India services like IAS, IPS and IFS, which are common to both the center and the states. The IAS officers, though they are recruited and their conditions of service are regulated by the center, they are asked to serve the states. And these common all India service holders are required to serve both the execution of the central laws as well as the state laws. But it is imperative to note that though these all India service holders are sent to the states to perform and execute policies and legislations, they are under the control of the central government, but they reside in the states where they are sent. Another interesting peculiarity of the Indian Federation is the office of the Comptroller and Auditor General. The Comptroller and Auditor General of India audits the accounts for both the union government as well as the state governments. The Comptroller and Auditor General is appointed by the President without consulting the states. The audit office of the Comptroller and Auditor General seriously restricts the fiscal autonomy of the states. This is unthinkable in America, where the Comptroller General of America has no power so far as state finances are concerned. Let us now move on to another interesting area of federal system is the Parliament's control over state list during ordinary times. We have already learned that how during an emergency, the states become puppets at the hands of the union government. This can also happen during normal times. Article 249 of the Constitution provides that if the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution by 2/3 majority that a particular subject contained in the state list has acquired national importance, then that subject of the state list comes under the legislative competence of the Union Parliament. This clearly shows that the Parliament can take over a subject of the state list even without amending the Constitution. which is reflective of the growing union power over the states. Appointment of the governor, which has always remained controversial. The governor of the Indian states are appointed by the president and they hold office in the discretion of the president. The governor, though, is the constitutional head of the state, but he or she reports to the center. He holds office during the pleasure of the president. He also acts as the agent of the center. In fact, through the governor, the center institutes and exercises control over the states. But we need to remember here that in the American states, the governors are elected heads and the center does not have any power in controlling the American state governors. Let us move on to another important area where we find that in India we have an integrated election machinery. The Election Commission of India is a constitutional body and it operates for the conduct and superintendence of elections both for the center as well as the states. In America, the task of conducting state elections is given to the state legislatures and the union government conducts elections to the central government. You do not have an independent election commission in America. The framers of the Constitution created an independent election commission in order to maintain the independence and impartiality of the institution as well as to ensure that the citizens vote freely and fairly in all elections. Despite the fact that state elections hold an important place in the Indian federal parliamentary system, the states do not have any independent mechanism, but it is the Election Commission of India, which is a central body which controls and supervises state elections. The position for creation, appointment and removal of members of the Election Commission is in the hands of the President. The states do not have any power so far as appointment and removal of election commissioners and chief election commissioner is concerned. Another interesting area of the peculiarity of Indian federal system is veto power over state bills. The governor is empowered to reserve certain bills passed by the state legislature for consideration of the president. The president can withhold his assent to those bills not only in the first instance but also in the second instance. This gives immense power to the president and the union government in rejection of state legislations. Both in America as well as in Australia, the states are autonomous within their fields and there is no such provision for the governor reserving laws made by the state legislature to be referred to the American president. Thus, what we have learned so far: 1. We don't have a double citizenship system. We do not have division of public services, that is the All India services, which are sent to the states. And finally, we have an integrated court system which decides both federal as well as the state cases, though the state high courts are there, but they serve under the integrated judicial system of the Supreme Court. Position of the states in the federation. Now, we know, students, that states are autonomous independent units in a federal system. But in India, are the states autonomous and independent? Now, in USA, states are considered to be sovereign, completely independent from the control of the union government. And that is the reason why you will find that the Constitution of America provides for certain provisions for state rights. Indian Constitution does not provide for any specific clear provision exclusively for state rights. Such protection of rights for the states were not considered to be necessary in India, as the states before independence were not sovereign entities, and because of the fact that we are not a coming together federation but a holding together federation. Another important thing to note is that Indian states have no right to secede. We can see a number of regional movements going on in the different states for new states, but none of the states formed so far have the right to secede out of the Indian Union. Another important thing to note is that the consent of the states are not important or imperative so far as formation of new states are concerned, and finally we have no equality so far as state representation is concerned. Another important, very important area is so far as concurrent jurisdiction is concerned. If there is a conflict between a union law and a state law, automatically and obviously the union law reigns supreme. Union control in normal times is available in executive field also. The union government has the power to issue directions upon the state governments to ensure due compliance of their legislative and administrative action of the union, and if a state government tries to supersede, the union has the power to ensure that its directives are complied by the states. So the states under any circumstances have the right not to supersede central laws. It should always ensure complete and full compliance of union laws. This leads to a centralizing tendency on the part of the central government. Based on the foregoing discussion, India is often described as a quasi-federal state, a centralized federal system, and that we are neither a federal system nor a completely unitary system, but we are a combination of a federation and a unitarian system. But Granville Austin, one of the celebrated writers on Indian federal system, says that you can't say that Indian federal system is a quasi-federal or centralized federal system. Rather, he says that Indian federalism is an example of cooperative federalism, which produces a strong central government, yet it does not result in weak provincial governments. In recent years, we have seen, especially after 2015, the Planning Commission being replaced by the Niti Aayog, and we find a cooperative spirit on the part of the union government to bring in the states on a platform to interact with the central government. In fact, if you look into the reason behind the formation of the Niti Aayog, it believes in the ideology of states first approach. This is a major change in the nature of the Indian federal system. The founding principles of Niti Aayog are based on cooperative federalism, where there is a collaboration of the central government and the state governments, and competitive federalism also because it believes in healthy competition between the different states. Niti Aayog has adopted a decentralized and a bottom-up strategy to ensure that the central and state governments work together as equal partners in Team India. This is definitely a turning point in the history of Indian federal system, where states are considered to be collaborators and not agents of the union government. Thus, we find that in the 75 years of the working on the Indian federal system, there has been different twists and turns in the Indian federal system, but definitely Indian federal system has a long way to go, and there are no chances of disintegration or collapse in the near future. Thank you.